Hey folks, today I do the substrate for the 43 gallon. I've got the old tank moved out, I got this put in place. I'm going to show you that whole process right after this. Hey YouTube, this is Pecktec, and as you can see I've got the new tank put into place. I had to start by taking the old one down. Of course, right? But the thing is, I wanted to save a lot of the stuff that I had going in there. In particular, I had some objectives around. I wanted some of the original substrate to go into here. I want the canister filter media to be okay if possible. I wanted to recycle it into the new filter. I had the plenum to make adjustments for, which was in my last video. So the 27 gallon's been up for years, and it kind of became a drop zone for a bunch of different plants just to kind of see how they would do in that tank. So as part of breaking down the tank, I decided to use as much of the water as I could to kind of store the plants and anything that I pulled out of that tank. And I filled up about 5 buckets with water from the aquarium. So pulling plants out of the 27 gallon was a very time-consuming process. I had some absolutely huge Anubis plants, and I believe that's Anubis nana, maybe not, and maybe some Anubis nana petite. Now, what's happened is it's been up for so long that all kinds of different chunks of Anubis had been put in there, and I'd put a little tiny stem in there, kind of shove it into a corner and forget about it. And then, you know, here I am years later pulling some of these out, and they're these giant bushes. But I went through each of those bushes and I kind of broke them up. I cut off any leaves that looked like they had their best days gone by. So trimming the plants, trimming like the less perfect pieces of those plants out, and then sorting them into buckets. I actually did the same thing with every plant that was in there. I went through, there's some crypts, there's a really huge mix, even a bunch of some wasser tang that was kind of just floating around in there. I found a ton of that. A lot of Java fern, like basic plants, and a couple of onesie-twosie plants here and there. I think I have some dwarf Sagittaria, and the crypts that had just kind of taken over the whole thing. Most of those actually were in pretty bad shape. They had kind of gotten overgrown and their roots had gone everywhere. They were almost growing, it seemed like, as much above the ground as below. And the canopy had gotten so thick that it was getting really leggy down below, and just a lot of really not great specimens. So after I did that, I disconnected everything, took the canister filter off. I brought a dolly in and just kind of hauled it off to the backyard, where I pulled it off the stand, hosed it out, and it looks really great actually right now. It's in my garage, and I flipped the glass around. There's like no scratches on the back, and I was able to clean it up real nice. So I could potentially bring that thing back. Although while I was cleaning it, I was looking a little more critically at the silicone edges and stuff, and it probably could stand to be redone. I don't know, maybe that'd be a good first try for that, just to try and redo those seals. So after that, I moved this into place and kind of eyeballed it to make sure it's all even. Try to get it as even on the stand as I could. I left myself a good amount of working space in the back so I could kind of get back there and reach back there and make adjustments and stuff should the need arise. I already know I'm going to have to replace the lily pipes on a couple of these things and stuff too. So I already know I'm going to be back there pretty soon. You might be wondering why there's a whole video on the substrate for this tank. Well, it's because I tend to do sort of a lasagna style substrate layering system. I like to put really coarse things on the bottom that can hold good bacteria for that kind of anaerobic bacteria underneath. And as it gets closer and closer to the top, I like to do finer and finer types of substrate. Now, it just so happens that I had a lot of leftovers that were kind of similar, very adjacent types of substrate, and I ended up going out and getting one more bag of one that I haven't ever used before. But basically, this is how it went down. So as you know, I've got an undergravel filter. I make a plenum out of it, basically. So on top of the plenum, I spread out the baked clay, I'm using Special Kitty cat litter from Walmart just because I had some. It's also been mentioned that there's an oil dry. There's a product called Oil Dry, which is basically the same kind of baked clay and might even be less granular and easier to use. So I made my first little bun, and I kind of encased the canister filter. I made it so it couldn't move around so much. I wanted to make sure that the little pipe that's going to go up into the canister is still able to connect and all nice and straight. So I took the baked clay and I kind of worked it around the sides, and then I piled it up on top and I sort of made a little bun there. Then I sloped it in towards the front, but I left most of the front empty. Now after the baked clay, I had a little bit of the red clay powder. This contains a lot of iron and can be a good food source for bacteria, especially in the early days. I sprinkled that all over the top of the baked clay, and then I sprinkled it in the empty space in the front of the tank. In the front, I added power sand. I've got this ADA power sand. It's a really, really cool material. I've used it, I actually used the exact same thing in my spec 16 gallon, and I've had really, really good growth out of that. So I think that that's going to be good, especially for the carpeting plants with the lower roots. They're going to get to that really quick. And again, I sort of feathered that up onto the clay and sort of had a little bit of a mix. I was actually able to spread it pretty thin and get it pretty far back there, so there's elements of it from about halfway up the tank on down. So I wanted to incorporate some substrate from the original tank. It's going to have some organics in it, hopefully some good bacteria and stuff. And while I was breaking the other tank down, I got these big plastic cups full, and I just kind of put them in the buckets where I was storing the plants to kind of keep it all wet. But I took those two thin cups and I sort of made a thin layer of the original material. Now this has got pieces of roots in it and all kinds of gosh knows what is in there already. But it'll be a good starting food base down deep. This next part I question a little bit. Just because I had it, I decided to use some fluorite. And it's not fluorite dark or anything like that. It was just like the regular kind of reddish colored fluorite. I had a big bag of it on hand, so it was kind of free. I rinsed it out really good, of course. Also, same with the baked clay, with the cat litter. I rinsed both those things really well. The rest of it didn't really need to be rinsed out. The rest of the stuff I'm going to use. But I dumped the fluorite on the top, and I made a crust all over the entire top layer. And what that's going to do is it's going to sort of encapsulate all that stuff down there and kind of give it a little bit of, make it a little harder for it to make it towards the surface. The power sand in particular has a really light color. It's kind of a dirty beige color with some dark stripes in it, and it looks kind of funny when it makes its way to the surface. I think I made my surface a little too thin when I did it before, so I wanted to add something on top of it. What I wish I'd done is I wish I'd just gone to the store and gotten a big bag of the fluorite dark, so that or black even, just so it would not be a different color, because almost all the rest of the substrate from here on up is like jet black. So I've got kind of this layer that you can see, and I should have probably pushed it away from the front too, but I kind of like to see the layers. But especially if you go around the side, there's this red layer. And no matter how thick I make the top, that red will eventually make it up to the top and kind of become part of the color of this tank. That's not a super big deal. I'm going to cover this thing in rock, wood, and plants, and a little bit of color coming up here and there as plants get pulled and trimmed and stuff. It's probably not going to be a big deal. Actually, eventually the mix ends up looking pretty good, but sometimes it annoys that part of me that wants to just match everything. So the next thing to go down was the ADA Aqua Soil. It's an Amazonia Aqua Soil. Again, this is something I already had. I had this, I had an extra bag left over from some project. I can't even remember which one now. That bag of Aqua Soil didn't go very far. There's a pretty big footprint inside this 40-gallon tank. So I was able to kind of do the front, or I was able to kind of partially did it. I made sure that went directly on top of the power sand, just so it would be more, all the ADA stuff kind of together. I filled out the rest of this with Mr. Aqua plant soil that I had from my project this summer when I built the 25-gallon. That soil has really been fantastic in the tank upstairs, and I think it's every bit as good as the ADA, as far as I can see anyway. I don't know about longevity or how it breaks down or anything like that, but I know it grows plants. Or helps anyway. And that was the last of the soil that I had. And I was still seeing some red coming through. Now, I don't mind if it comes through later, but I don't want it to start that way. So I was like, man, I really wish I'd had like one more bag of substrate to throw over it. So I went back to the store. And I came back home with something I've never used before. It's a fluorite black sand. Now, I don't know if you've ever planted in sand before, but it is so nice. And I don't know if you've ever planted in soil before, but it is frustrating. Now, sand is usually an inert product, and I haven't read all the documentation on there to see, but my guess was that the black sand would be an inert thing that but would match the color black that I kind of was going for. Now, all three of these blacks aren't exactly alike, and that's going to be okay. As they mix together, they sort of blend really well. But I smeared the black sand, which gave me yet another layer, and I was able to do it kind of thinly over most of the top of this thing. And my hope, I think eventually that sand will kind of make its way down into some of the layers of substrate. I don't think it'll make it all the way to the bottom, because it's really thickly packed on those different layers. But at least in the short term, it's going to make planting a lot easier, I think. I hope. I'm going to see in just a minute. And it made it just a little bit thicker so I can easily get the plants in. Since I already had that water from the aquarium, I decided to add a bit in here to kind of maybe try to preserve the good bacteria. If you remember, I put that thin layer of substrate from the other tank. And I filled it up to approximately where I think maybe that layer is. It didn't end up going all the way up. Yeah, you can kind of see it on the corners and stuff where it was where the substrate was really thin. But it was just enough to kind of keep that area down there very moist and ready. Between the breaking down, the trimming of the plants, and doing all this, it just took way too long. And I was exhausted by the time I got to the end. So it is now the next day, and I still have not put any plants in there or anything like that. And I don't know if the bacteria is still viable inside of the canister filter or anything. I'm going to go ahead with my plan. I'll probably partially pull some of the biological material from the sump, which happens to be right next to it anyway. Next up is the hardscape. I'm not sure if that'll be a long or short video. I'm going to add some wooden rocks in here and kind of make this into a proper aquarium. Huge thank you to my patrons who believe in me and support me through this project. Huge thank you to 7 Porch for giving me the opportunity to use one of their cool aquariums and some other supplies that they've given me. And a huge thank you to you for coming around and sticking around to the end of the video. The hardscape's going to be pretty cool. I've got lots of plants. You would not believe so many plants that I could possibly put in here. I'm actually worried that I have too many plants. And I'm going to actually... And the plan originally was to kind of hit up like 3 or 4 different tanks to grab kind of a variety of plants to bring in here and make this more diverse than it was as the 27-gallon queue. But I've literally got so many plants, I might even have to start another project just to do something with them. I can't just throw them out. The podcast series that I keep talking about will be happening soon. If you're a Patreon, you'll be able to see all of them. And I'm going to release some Netflix style, so they'll just kind of all come out at once. If you're a regular subscriber, no problem. I'm going to release them in clips, and then maybe the full one at the end of the week. Or I'm still working on a schedule, but there'll be short versions of the videos and there'll be long versions of the videos, so you can zero in on like one particular thing that you might be interested in, or you can watch the whole thing or listen to the whole thing, however you like to do it. All that's coming before long. But until next time, follow your bliss, keep it clean, tank, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.